Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Boxing insider Rick Glaser has sought to shut down a rumour that's been attributed to him regarding the Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz pay-per-view numbers. It had been claimed online that Rick Glaser stated only 2,500 buys were logged for that fight. Yes, you heard right, 2,500 buys. And that seems to have originated from a thread on BoxingScene.com on a forum page from someone called Monzon99. And you can see here on screen that this is the paragraph, a number of derogatory statements regarding the fight and the fighters, etc. The middle piece of the paragraph is where the buy rate is at, or alleged to be at, and attributed to Rick Glaser. It says the pay-per-view tracking results, according to Rick Glaser, are stagnating at 2,500 buys. Now, it seems like this person has interviewed their typewriter to get to the statement, because Rick Glaser categorically denies he ever made any sort of statement regarding 2,500 buys. So he says, and this is on his Facebook page, which is open. You can go find this paragraph yourself if you want to have a read through in the comments and such. It's been brought to my attention by several and a boxing radio show this morning. There is an internet rumour going around that I said that the Wilder-Ortiz rematch did 2,500 pay-per-view buys, which I've never said. That is a totally fabricated story. That number never came from me. Before the fight, I predicted 220,000 pay-per-view buys, but I don't really think now it did 200,000 buys. No matter what the powers that be at Fox or PBC announce at their pay-per-view number, I stand by everything I say or write, and that is clearly not one to be attributed to yours truly. I appreciate you sharing this. Thank you. So Rick Glaser categorically denying he'd ever uttered 2,500 buys. And when I heard that rumour, because I did my weekly live stream where it was actually mentioned by a number of commenters in the chat, I just sort of thought that seemed way outside of the realms of possibility. Like it was missing an O or two, or probably two O's, not one, because 25,000 buys, even to me, would be shockingly low. I think a lot of people, based on how it was promoted, expected that it was going to do some numbers, but because it was a recycled retread fight, maybe it wouldn't have captured the interest that a fresh fight may have, or a rematch, say, with Tyson Fury. But 2,500 buys, I'm kind of surprised that this has got any legs at all and that people have sort of bought into this narrative. But yeah, I mean, whatever the number is going to be, and Rick Glaser does now believe it'll probably be below 200,000, it's probably not going to be the big numbers that maybe some were sort of predicting. I had seen some estimations online ahead of the fight because it had been so well promoted by Fox, and they did a really good job, that maybe it would do somewhere around 400,000, 450,000 buys. But given the level of interest that initially sort of was there for the fight when it was announced, I always sort of thought 200 to 250,000 buys. But if it does more than that, well, actually, I think that's not too bad. And if it gets over 300,000, well, then it's probably actually in the context of that fight at this time, not a bad number at all. But if it does less than 200,000 buys, I think there will be people that will really be piling in to say it's a massive flop. And given the salaries that were going to be on the line for that fight, Deontay Wilder, according to reports from Dan Rafael and other media, was contracted to get $20 million for that fight. Luis Ortiz close to $7 million. And on pay-per-view alone, it would have to do a huge number just to make it up, to make their purses. And remember, the broadcasters, other people, they are taking their cut on the way. So this was always going to be a bit of a financial loss here. But I think the target, especially for Fox, they wanted to secure this fight, show Deontay Wilder, show the PBC how they could put a pay-per-view fight together to try land the pay-per-view fight for the rematch for Tyson Fury. And if that's going to be a joint effort between ESPN and a PBC broadcaster, Fox wants to be that PBC broadcaster. So I always saw this as more of a trial run, that they were going to sort of show their wares and how they could sort of put it together and promote Deontay Wilder to the world. And if it does actually do less than, say, 200,000 buys, which is is now being suggested by Rick Glaser, for example, you can probably still thank Fox for promoting it and pushing it so hard. It probably did boost the numbers in the end. And what we had heard, of the numbers so far that are available, that the Fox prelims, this is in the lead up to the pay-per-view card, which obviously was $75 a pop, etc., that those numbers were tracking at about 141,000. That was on FS2. So if that's an indicator of the numbers and the interest in the fight, because that is lower than some other pay-per-views, then maybe it's not going to hit the sort of Errol Spence and, Mikey Garcia and some of those recent pay-per-view that those guys have been involved in. But it does give Fox and the PBC a barometer as well of what Deontay Wilder's star power as a pay-per-view fighter is. Remember the Tyson Fury fight? That was reported to be about 330,000 pay-per-view buys. Fury and Wilder, they did a big sales job, decent numbers in their end for that first US pay-per-view for both of them. But for Wilder being on his own, because Luis Ortiz doesn't necessarily have the same following, the same fan base, a lot of the support that was coming behind Luis Ortiz for that fight was actually from Deontay Wilder supporters. So that pay-per-view and the selling of it was almost exclusively on the shoulders of Deontay Wilder. So we'll get an indication of how he can sell a fight just on his own name. And if it does flop, or if it does okay, or it does better than expected, and the numbers will be out soon, well, we still have a gauge of where he's really at. And maybe if it does flop, that will certainly put a dent in the credibility of Wilder's statements that he was the one that was responsible for the majority of the buys for the Fury and Wilder fight. But no matter putting that aside, the rematch between Wilder and Fury is where all these guys are really looking in terms of their attention. That's why Fox would have spent into this fight knowing that there was money to be made down the line. So while a lot of these guys will take a bath in a financial sense, etc., even Deontay Wilder, he was part of that promotion too, so maybe he took a financial hit. But these guys are working forward to the rematch in February 2020. That's when they're talking about for Wilder and Fury too. But it will be interesting to get the actual pay-per-view number for this Ortiz and Wilder fight, because it's a gauge of a star power for what was essentially a retread fight that no one was really that excited about when it was first announced, but it was promoted well. Fox really laid it on, and we'll see what happens. But what do you make of this? Rick Glaser denying this 2,500 pay-per-view story, saying, no, I didn't say that, it's completely fake news. Drop a comment. Loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.